really nice to be here today and to speak to you all about the gifts of nature. I'd love it if you were happy to share maybe just your name and maybe where you're joining from today. It would just be lovely to see kind of, who we're speaking to across the country. I'm in Sheffield at the moment, and the weather is a bit grey, to be honest. The sun was trying to shine just before, but yeah, as I say, it would be lovely just to see where everyone's from. So please do introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to. So while you're doing that, I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. Great. So as Imo says, my name's Sarah, and I'm from the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare, which is a charity in the UK working to make healthcare more sustainable. Does what it says on the tin. So I'm the Green Space for Health Director. So again, as Imo said, I oversee the green space work. So part of our work is clinical. So it's looking at different specialties and different clinical pathways and how we can reduce carbon within those areas. But we also use green space for health and well-being, recognising that prevention of ill health and health creation is a really important part of a sustainable healthcare system. So one of our main projects is the NHS Forest, and this is essentially a tree planting project where we try to get more trees onto NHS land, so where they're needed most for health and well-being. So tree planting is a really important part of the NHS Forest, but we also do other things relating to nature. So we have what we call nature recovery rangers, and they're people who are based at NHS sites, and they're there to essentially improve the nature and the green space that's there, but also connect people with that nature. Whether that's through, different therapies or classes or, maybe art classes, or we had some Tai Chi classes going on at one of our NHS sites where we've got a ranger. We also do a lot of training and webinars, such as this one, to tell people more about sustainable healthcare and about nature and its benefits. And we also do some research and policy work as well, trying to embed it more into kind of national policy that, we need more nature provision and we need better access to that nature as well. And yeah, at the bottom there, we do meadow creation, vegetable growing, nature trails, therapeutic gardens, orchards, lots and lots of different things, all to do with nature and how we can access that better. So today's webinar, we're going to be having a look at how nature is good for us, how it's good for our health and well-being. I'm going to share a case study with you, which is from Mount Vernon Cancer Centre, which is a NHS site that we've worked quite closely with over the years. Then we're going to have a quick look at why nature is good for us, how to get more nature in your life, and then I've got some resources that I'd love to share with you towards the end as well. And as I said, we've got some time at the end for Q&A if you've got any questions for me. So before we dive into how or why nature is good for us, I've got a bit of a poll that I'd love you to get involved in. So I'm going to share in the chat a website that you can click on. So it's www.menti.com, and it will ask you to put in a code, which I've just shared in the chat. So you can do this on your laptop or on your phone or just whatever's easiest for you. And I'll also share the screen on my on my screen as well. So you should be able to see instructions at the moment, hopefully. And if this is all too much, don't worry. You don't have to use the Mentimeter. You can just put something in the chat box if you'd prefer. But hopefully you can all see that now. If you are having any issues, feel free to pop it in the chat or anything. But I'm going to move to the first question, which is just quite simple. Do you enjoy being in nature? So yes, no, or maybe just sometimes. I can see we've got a few responses. We've got about 5 people who've responded. Everyone's saying yes so far, so that's really good. Just check the chat. Great, and Claire, thanks in the chat. You've said yes. Another yes in the chat. Great. So far, 100% of people do enjoy being in nature, which is great. The next question is, do you think being in nature is good for your physical health? We've got a few more yeses in the chat as well. Great. So far, everyone is in agreement that they think nature is good for their physical health. So I'm going to move on again to the next one. Do you think it's good for your mental health? Again, feel free to pop it in the chat. Got lots of yeses. Great. And then the final question for this little poll is just, do you feel that you spend enough time in nature? So yes, you spend enough time in nature. No, you don't, or maybe you do. Maybe it's another sometimes. Just have a look at the chat again. We've got a no and a maybe, and another no. That's really interesting. So actually, most people have said either no or maybe, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, but that's absolutely fine. And towards the end of the webinar, I'm going to be sharing some ideas of how you can get more nature in your life, and we're going to share some ideas with each other as well. So for now, you can head back to the presentation, which I'm just sharing on the screen, and I'm going to start talking a bit more about how nature is good for us. And we're going to look at these 5 different areas. So it's good for our physical and mental well-being, which obviously, you all know that. It's good for attention restoration. It can help to reduce inequalities, and it's also really beneficial for learning as well. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic really highlighted the need for nature connection. I think a lot of people were spending more time outside, once we were confined into our homes, and people were trying to seek out that nature connection. Some of this will be quite intuitive, some of it you will know. As we saw, everyone knows nature's good for our physical and mental well-being. And I'm going to highlight some of the key points around these different areas, and also share some interesting studies to help back up some of these theories. So how's nature good for our physical well-being? So again, as we all know, it's great for getting us active, getting out, going for a walk in our local park, or out in the countryside, maybe meeting up with friends, walking the dog, that kind of thing. It's great for that. It's also been found that nature is able to help boost our immune systems. So there's chemicals that have been found in trees that trees release called phytoncides, and they've been shown to actually affect our human microbiome and actually boost our immune systems. So there's direct benefits from nature on our kind of physical health as well. Nature provides ecosystem services such as, reducing air pollution, cooling the air around us, and, obviously reducing carbon in the atmosphere as well, which helps to mitigate climate change, which is obviously going to be a huge health issue as well. It's also great for nutrition. Obviously, that's how we grow our food. And we've worked with some mental health trusts who are working with patients with eating disorders, who actually find that food growing is a really helpful way of helping patients to kind of repair their relationship with food if they actually can grow it themselves and kind of feel that tangible process. So that's, a really interesting one as well. And quite an old study from Ulrich in 1984, which has been replicated many times and is used quite a lot, showed that even just having a view from your hospital room of a tree can actually speed up recovery times after surgery, and reduce your need for the use of painkillers as well. So yeah, as I say, just having a view from your window of a tree, which is amazing. I wanted to share this study, which looked at the impact of green space and nature-based interventions on cardiovascular health and cancer-related outcomes. So this was a systematic review. So it looked at lots and lots of different experimental studies and looked at the results that each of those studies showed. I looked at lots of different kinds of green space interventions like forest bathing, green exercise, gardening, and again, just viewing nature. And the outcomes that it concluded from all of these different studies was that these different interventions did have really good benefits for blood pressure, for cancer-related quality of life, and also markers of cardiovascular disease risk as well. So the study concluded that, first of all, that healthcare providers should consider the promotion of nature-based interventions to improve health outcomes, and also that there is a policy need for investment in more equitable green spaces as well. So thinking about mental well-being, again, we all know that nature is good for our mental well-being. So it's been shown to reduce stress, to have benefits for kind of more clinical mental health, so anxiety and depression. It helps to build community connections. You might go out and walk your dog in the local park and just see people out there. I think dog walking in particular is really good for that, because you end up, speaking to other dog owners. And I don't have a dog myself, but I'd love one just for that reason. And it also helps to reduce inattention and fatigue, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Again, I wanted to share a specific study that was related to the role of nature in cancer patients' lives. So again, this was a systematic review. So it was looking at lots of different pieces of evidence, particularly looking at qualitative literature. And what the study found was that nature was really seen as a kind of a secure base. So participants in each of the different studies found nature to be an unburdened and uninterrupted space that was embedded in everyday life, from which they could source strength and meaning to address their needs. So nature offered patients a familiar and nurturing context from which new perspectives could emerge and caring connections could be made with themselves, with others, the past and the future. So it was really helpful for supporting people to navigate clinical and personal realities of cancer. And I think a really important thing to mention is that it was very deeply personal experiences. So all participants experienced it in very different ways. And the kind of nature, the benefits of what they were experiencing from nature couldn't be predetermined or even administered. But what was consistent was the fact that participants consistently attributed importance to engaging with nature and really found benefit and meaning from those interactions in many different forms. So I've got another Mentimeter activity. So if you are happy to go back to menti.com and use the same code, hopefully if you've still got it up, it should just be the same. It should still be there. But I've got a question asking just how being in nature makes you feel. So I'll just skip to that question. And again, just considering the fact that, what that study was saying, it's incredibly personal. People will experience it in very different ways. And I'd just love to hear from you the different ways that you might experience nature. And it should come up with a nice word cloud once we've all submitted a few words. And again, if you just want to pop it in the chat, that's absolutely fine. In the chat, we've got at peace and refreshed and relaxed, joyful. Happy. Great. These are all really lovely words. So yeah, thank you for sharing those. That's really nice. And feel free to add more if you'd like to. Great. So one of the other areas that's been researched quite a bit is attention restoration. So I just wanted to share attention restoration theory with you. So there are 3 different types of attention. So we have directed attention, hard fascination, and soft fascination. And directed attention is things like working or talking. So I'm using my directed attention right now in thinking about what I'm saying and sharing the slides and switching between screens and all of that kind of thing. So it's anything that you consciously think about and consciously attend to. Hard fascination is things that you can't turn away from. So that might be, looking at your phone, scrolling social media, it might be watching TV, or, maybe listening to a podcast, that kind of thing. So yeah, things that capture your attention and you can't turn away from. And these 2 types of attention are they are fatiguing, so they're depleting. Whereas soft fascination is something that you can focus on, but it doesn't take all of your attention and it allows your mind to wander. And so this last one, soft fascination, is a restorative type of attention. And that's what nature allows us to do. So I've given the example here of watching a waterfall or, maybe looking out at the birds, that kind of thing. So I try to get out on my lunch breaks for a walk around the local park. And I always used to listen to a podcast while I was doing that, which is great. And I'm, still getting out and getting exercise and getting nature. But in terms of attention, I was still kind of using that hard fascination of kind of listening to something and kind of processing that. Whereas actually, if you just go out and kind of be in nature and experience that, that's much more beneficial to actually restoring your attention. I also, during breaks might have a look at my phone and go on social media, but that's not really going to help restore my attention for working for the rest of the day. So yeah, something interesting to think about. So reducing inequalities, this isn't necessarily the most obvious thing, but nature has been found to actually help reduce inequalities, and health inequalities do exist in the UK, and that's actually one of the NHS's main priorities at the moment, is reducing health inequalities. But access to green space that's also been found to be unequal. And in urban areas, the most affluent 20% of wards have been found to have 5 times the amount of green space than the most deprived 10% of wards. So from that, and actually I've got a little graph to kind of demonstrate that. So the red bars are the lower income households, and the gold bars are the higher income households. And you can see that on these 3 different areas, so if they've got green space within 5 minutes walk of home, whether the streets are green, and whether there's good walking routes where they live, you can see that there's a clear difference between the 2 income categories on all of those. And barriers to access could be physical, so simply not having that green space nearby, or not having the kind of tree-lined streets, but also they can be psychological as well, thinking about who green space really is for, and whether natural environments are safe for particular groups of people. But green space has been found to be equigenic, which means that it helps to address health inequalities. So a recent research paper found that those living in higher areas of social deprivation experienced even greater effects of the benefits of trees on levels of depression. And there's been a few different studies, and this next study was a longitudinal study, so looking at over a longer period of time, and found that for people in the most socially disadvantaged neighbourhoods, access to green space in childhood linked to lower anxiety in old age. So showing that, throughout your life, if you get that green space in childhood, it can have benefits for you later in life as well. And last but not least, learning can really benefit from green space as well. So this was another review. This was an integrative review that summarised different evidence on the role of nature in learning, and concluded that the evidence is very strong. So it showed that experiences of nature boost academic learning, personal development, and environmental stewardship. And reports indicate shifts in perseverance, problem solving, critical thinking, leadership, teamwork, and resilience. So loads of different kind of broad benefits for people by being in nature. So I wanted to share a case study with you. I mentioned at the beginning. So this is at Mount Vernon Cancer Centre, which is in North London. And we worked with them to build this fern garden that you can see here on the right. And the fern garden is a private and fully wheelchair accessible space. And you can see it's overlooked by the windows of the chemotherapy suite there. So people who are receiving treatment could kind of look out on the fern garden. But it also meant that patients and visitors could spend time in the garden while awaiting treatment. They could have consultations outdoors, and also this wooden hut here, we were able to even allow patients to receive treatment in the wooden shelter as well. So I've got a video that I'd like to share with you, which will explain it better than I could myself. So I'll just play that, and hopefully, Imo, just let me know if you can't hear it or anything.
In my experience, which has been about 30 years in cancer, oncology patients need distraction, and they need comfort, and they need something else outside their disease and their treatment. So for them in the chemo suite here, for example, they've got great massive big windows. They can see outside. They can now come outside. They can interact with nature. Their minds aren't on sitting in a clinical area with with an infusion pump beeping, and thinking about just that and looking at a patient opposite them doing exactly the same.
So we've made a beautiful outdoor space here that should attract people to use it. We've got a warm, natural chemotherapy shelter where hopefully some treatments will be delivered outside. There's spaces to sit and relax, to have lunch or to have warm gatherings amongst staff, or family members can use this space to wait. Just everything about this space will keep on developing, and people should use it and find a warm connection with nature here.
To have chemo treatment outside would be fantastic, actually. I would have loved to have done that. Again, because you're part of nature, just a sense of well-being, a sense of calmness. I think it's something different as well, you know, a change from the usual sort of hospital chemo ward setting. You almost feel that you're not at the hospital, that you're actually, you know, in your own garden or your own space.
So in the design of the build is these lovely louvers, these long large panels that can turn individually.
This is fantastic. It's such a kind of simple but fantastic idea. You know, because if I'm feeling hot and I want some breeze, I can adjust the slats. If I'm cold, I just push the slats back. It's a sheltered space. It offers sun protection because it's something else that's a big thing for our patients. Chemotherapy makes patients more sensitive, or their skin more sensitive to the side effects of sun. But I think it's just a really comfortable, bright space and very accessible. I think it'll be fantastic.
Great. So yeah, we would love to see more fern gardens like the one at Mount Vernon, so that more patients and visitors and even staff as well can kind of get benefits of having that green space where they're receiving treatment. And I just wanted to share this quote from a breast cancer patient, Claire, at the Mount Vernon Cancer Centre, which said, "When I felt like I was being poisoned on the inside with chemotherapy drugs, it was very helpful to witness living things growing and carrying on in nature. It gave me hope." So really similar to that study earlier about the kind of mental health benefits and the quality of life of cancer patients from kind of experiencing nature and that deeply personal connection to that. So I briefly wanted to talk about why nature is good for us. We've talked about how it is. And there's not really one kind of absolute reason as to why that is, but a lot of people talk about evolution and the fact that humans evolved in natural environments and our brains evolved in natural environments. So our brains and our hormones are still wired to respond positively to them. And the quote I heard in a podcast recently was that it's like trying to run new software on million-year-old hardware. We're meant to be around trees. So, all the new kind of technology and the pace of life at the moment. But our brains are kind of the million-year-old software. We evolved in that kind of natural environment. So biophilia literally translates to love of life. And this biophilia theory talks about how humans have a natural affinity to connect with nature and other living things. And there's been loads of research around stress reduction and how peaceful natural environments, they activate our parasympathetic nervous system, so switching off our flight or fight responses. A more philosophical perspective is that humans experience beauty in nature, which is really calming and can even be exalting. So something about nature just makes us feel at home, which is, again, very similar to the evolution theory. So Immanuel Kant is a philosopher who talked about how our cognitive capacity maps really well onto the natural world, and it gives us a sense that we're not here randomly, that experiencing beauty is a uniquely human experience, and that animals can't actually experience beauty that we know of. But humans have sensibility, imagination, and understanding, which all work together to give us pleasure in experiencing that beauty. So he says that without nature, we're actually missing out on what makes us human. So quite a kind of grounding experience there. And there's also the kind of chemical hypothesis. So I already talked earlier about how trees have been found to release phytoncides, which have been shown to affect the human microbiome. And they've also found antidepressants, natural antidepressants in soil, particular chemicals. So gardening and handling soil can actually have a direct impact on our mental health as well. So bearing all of this in mind, I've just got one more menti quiz for you. And let me just find it. Exit that. And this is just an opportunity to share with one another, how could we be getting more nature in our life? So yeah, obviously at the beginning, most people said that they either weren't spending enough time in nature, or that, they maybe weren't spending enough time in nature. No one, unfortunately, said that they felt they were spending enough time in nature. So it would be great to just share some ideas with one another. And I've got a few ideas to share afterwards. But yeah, how could you get more nature in your life, and how could others be getting more nature in their lives? Again, feel free to share it in the chat box, or pop it into Menti. So in the chat box, we've got grow more plants in my little rockery and in tubs in my garden. We've also got gardening, and I've also been forest bathing, which is amazing. I haven't actually tried forest bathing, but I'd really love to try that. I think if you go on Eventbrite, or even just Google and type in your local area and forest bathing, you'd hopefully be able to find some sessions that are running that. So a few of the other ideas, we've got being stricter on daily walks every day. I think that's a great one. I really try hard to do that on my lunch breaks. Take my work breaks outside and take weekend breakfasts outside. I think that's a lovely idea. Making time during the workday to go outside, have a shorter lunch to allow time to have a walk too. That's a really good one. I think it was during the pandemic, I extended my lunch break and added half an hour onto the end of my workday, so that I had a full hour rather than just half an hour, because that meant I could eat my lunch and then make sure I could get out. And it was particularly during winter when I just wasn't getting any daylight whatsoever. So that's a really good idea if you're able to be flexible like that. So committing to taking a walk at lunchtime. I live next to a nature reserve, so no excuse. That's very fortunate to live next to a nature reserve. I bet that's lovely. Go out for a walk at a local park, grow flowers and plants, have something at the end of a walk, for example, a cafe. That's a great one. I know park run, they often have, they do park run at a park that might have a cafe, or they'll have a cafe nearby so that you can go and do that afterwards. That's a really good idea. And someone else in the chat said, visit the fantastic green spaces I have nearby, ask friends and family to take me at weekends when I'm not feeling well enough to get there by myself. Yeah, definitely, that's great. And last one I'll read out. So take time to notice nature even when I'm looking from the inside. Yes, that's a great one. As we heard in that study from Ulrich earlier, even just viewing nature can be really beneficial, not necessarily being out in nature. Take a walk in nature every day, go to the garden every day, sit and gaze outside looking at the garden, doing exercise outside if possible. Yeah, that's great. And one interesting thing that I heard in one of the studies was that you don't have to enjoy necessarily the experience, even if it's raining and it's really windy and cold outside. Even just getting outside for 10 minutes, even in those conditions, you still get those benefits of the attention restoration, the kind of mental well-being, physical well-being, all of those things, which I found really interesting when I heard that as well. Great. And growing plants which provide fruit and vegetables. Great, that's lovely. And so very briefly, here are a few kind of resources and places that you can look, because as we've talked about, nature isn't always accessible to everyone. Some of us might have gardens, some of us might not, some of us might actually live out in the countryside, whereas others are quite urban areas without much green space. But here are a few things that you can look up if you aren't sure where to look for green space. So Forestry England, and on their website, they've actually got wellbeing trails that you can use, and wellbeing journals as well that you can print out. The National Trust, you do generally have to pay for membership or pay to enter those, but they are often really beautiful green spaces, and they often have activities going on as well. The Ordnance Survey, so the OS maps you might have heard of, they have green space maps as well, which can help you to find different green spaces. Wildlife trusts and RSPB, someone mentioned they've got a reserve near their house. It might be one of those, but again, yeah, they often have reserves, again, often with activities going on that you can take part in. Joining community groups, so my local, I've got a kind of millennium garden near my house, and they have a volunteer group which you can get involved in to kind of actually take part in some of the gardening activities and maintaining that space. You could speak to your GP. Some of you might have made use of or be aware of green social prescribing, which is where your GP can link you up with a link worker to get you involved in green social prescribing activities, which can be really beneficial. And then I think someone mentioned an idea of getting houseplants as well, or maybe growing herbs. So if you don't have any outdoor space near you, you can bring it indoors, and you can look at growing your own houseplants and that kind of thing. So that's just a few ideas. And before we go into the Q&A section, I just wanted us, even though we're all here, some of you might be outside, I don't know, but presuming we're indoors, on our laptops, I wanted to share this kind of tree-based, nature-based meditation with you all. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long. So yeah, feel free to kind of find a comfortable place to sit in, and close your eyes if you feel comfortable to, or you can look at the beautiful images of the trees. But I will just get that up for you.
Let's begin by finding a comfortable position with a straight back, letting your neck lengthen and your shoulders drop. And when you're ready, soften or close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose and slowly breathe out. As you breathe in, let your belly swell, and as you breathe out, allow your shoulders to drop. Letting your breath find its natural rhythm, your mind and body still. Imagine you're sitting in a wood or under a tree in a park, wherever you feel comfortable. Picture the sunlight filtering through the leaves above you and feel it gently warming your skin. Feel the ground supporting you through your feet, and the quiet stillness of the trees around you. Let their peace and serenity seep into you, soothing away any tension in your forehead, your face, your jaw. Breathing peace into your neck, dropping your shoulders, softening your arms, your hands, your legs, and your feet. Let the peace of the trees breathe through you. Trees need only the sunlight, the water, and the ground that holds you to create life. And as they do so, they create the oxygen that gives you life and that connects you to them. These are the gifts of the trees: peace and life. With every breath in, accept these gifts. Let them breathe through you. And as you breathe out gratitude and love for the trees that sustain and hold you. Peace and life. Love and gratitude. As we come to the end of this meditation, take a moment to notice how you feel, to honour this connection you have to the natural world through your breath, and to remember that wherever you go, indoors or outside, every breath you take holds these gifts of peace and life, connecting you back to the trees. And now gently start to come back into the room, and when you're ready, open your eyes. Go in peace.
Great, so hopefully you'll feel nice and peaceful after that. Apologies for the music after it. You can't help YouTube moving on sometimes. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that. And just before we dive into questions, I just wanted to share a few resources. So if you did want to read more about the benefits of nature, and I would really recommend this podcast called Brain on Nature, which is from a woman who experienced a minor traumatic brain injury and found nature a really healing experience for her, and it was a really important part of her healing journey. So yeah, it's just really interesting and engaging, so would recommend that. The NHS Forest website has a lot of resources. We've got an evidence page, an evidence section, and you can also find out, you can search your own healthcare centre and see if they're part of the NHS Forest as well, because that could be somewhere that you find some green space as well, and accessible green space. The Well Garden Mind is a book, which is a really lovely book all about how nature is really good for our kind of brains and our mental well-being, written by a psychiatrist. And the University of Derby has a free open online course on nature connectedness. So yeah, you just need to sign up online. I think if you just Google nature connectedness, University of Derby, it should come up quite easily. But I'm very happy to share links for all of these. I could maybe send them to you to share around. So yeah, a few kind of further reading, suggested further reading if you would like to have more of a look into that. But that's everything from me today. So yeah, really happy to answer any questions or just hear any reflections or thoughts on anything we've talked about today. Thanks so much for listening.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. So anybody, if you have any questions for Sarah or any thoughts, as she said, that you'd like to share, please do use the Q&A button at the bottom of the page, or post anything you'd like to ask or share in the chat, and I can read that out as well. I'm feeling super relaxed after that, as I'm sure you all are as well. Maybe I'll start up with a question that I have. If you'd all like a little minute to think. I thought the Mount Vernon Fern Garden was so lovely, and really wonderful idea. Do you know if that's becoming quite a common feature in centres, or if it's something that's sort of being factored more these days into the design of spaces like that, and if we can expect to see more of it going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm definitely seeing more and more hospitals and healthcare spaces who are bringing in more, not necessarily, specifically kind of chemotherapy gardens or things like that, but kind of general therapy gardens and sensory spaces, and those that don't have much outdoor space, they're trying to make use of like rooftops. So we've seen quite a few rooftop gardens, or just bringing nature in generally through the use of like living walls, for example. And I know some hospitals have really thought about it in the way that the hospital itself is designed. So a really good example is Alderhay, which is a children's hospital in Liverpool. They really brought nature into the design of the building itself. So some of the kind of beams in the middle of the hospital that look like trees kind of leading up, and they've introduced loads of living walls, and it's right next to a park space as well. So yeah, definitely seeing more integration of green space into healthcare settings, and obviously that's what we're aiming to do through our work as well. So yeah, I hope that we will see more and more of that going forwards. I don't know if anyone lives nearby Mount Vernon, but it's got an amazing outdoor green space that's worth a visit if you do live anywhere near it. I think the Christie Hospital is an NHS forest site. I think they actually won an NHS Forest Award last year, possibly for that garden. Yeah, there's some great examples all across the country. Yeah, that's a good question. And again, it's something that's been kind of looked at in many different ways. But to be honest, any time outside will give you the benefits. There's some suggestion that maybe 10 minutes is a minimum, but anything above that really, you will get the benefits. There's something called lux, which is about the amount of natural light that you get, and even just being outside for a few minutes will give you that intake of lux, which can help with sleep and again, mental well-being and rest and relaxation, that kind of thing. So yeah, and you get kind of different levels of that depending on whether it's a cloudy day or a sunny day and that kind of thing. So I guess the real answer is that just any time outside will be beneficial. But I think, the more time that you can spend outside, the better.
Brilliant. That's nice to know you don't have to be out there for hours.
Yeah, definitely.
I was also wondering, how green does a green space need to be to have those effects?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. And it can kind of be anything. It could just be having trees lined along the side of the road. I think, being away from the kind of urban infrastructure that we experience in kind of, particularly in cities and in urban areas, getting to a space where you can't hear that traffic, you can't hear the kind of the sounds of the city. I think being out in nature, like in the countryside, has a very kind of special feel to it, in a way, a reverend feel to it. And I think that is really beneficial to be in that kind of space, but it's not 100% necessary to gain a lot of the benefits that I've talked about today. Like, again, thinking of that study that where even just a view of a tree can give you those well-being benefits. Small amounts are great, and that's really good for, if you can't access those more secluded areas. But I think that there are benefits to being kind of completely surrounded in nature. Yeah, immersed in it, exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yes, that's a great question. So yeah, I've talked a lot about green space, and there's green therapy we talk about, but actually blue therapy is there's lots of research around that as well, and that's being near any kind of water. So well, I guess I meant one of the examples I mentioned was watching a waterfall, but yeah, being near a running stream or a pond or being by the sea, again, that's been shown to have all the benefits I've talked about today. Personally, I absolutely love being by the ocean and just sitting and kind of watching the waves come and go. I think, again, that's that similar experience of that will be your kind of soft fascination, and you can just sit there for hours, can't you? You don't get bored, and you just really experience that beauty and experience those benefits. So yeah, as I say, I've talked a lot about greenness, green spaces, but blue spaces, water, and yeah, being by water has been shown to be really beneficial too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along. Thank you again, Sarah. It's been really, really interesting. Have a lovely day all, and thank you for coming along.